Thank you, and like my colleagues, I'm delighted to be here. Much appreciate the invitation from the Tokyo Foundation and the General Marshall Fund. And although we've only been here since Sunday, I feel I'm learning a lot. Now, speaking forth on a panel like this presents one with a problem, because I realize that everything's said, but it hasn't yet been said by me. So I'm going to apologize if I repeat some of the earlier comments, but I'll try and present some of the arguments in a slightly different way. And looking at Japan as someone from Britain, but I call myself a European, it seems to me to present two paradoxes. A political paradox and an economic paradox. To start with the political paradox, I define it with a question. Where is Japan? And when I pose that question, I pose it as one both of geography and of psychology. Because for an outsider, looking at Japan, for all its recent troubles with the economy, one sees a nation that is still the second most powerful economically in the world, but also a nation that politically or geopolitically is almost invisible. I mean, I spend a fair amount of my time traveling around the world, conferences like the one this week, in Asia, in the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East. In parenthesis, I'd say, as a columnist in Britain, I travel to these conferences and I listen to everyone else speak. I steal the best ideas and then I represent them as my own in the Financial Times. But one of the things that struck me in the last 2 or 3 years is most of the conversations that one engages in are about the shape of the new global political landscape, the rising powers versus the sole superpower, the nature of multilateralism and of multipolar competition. And there are endless conversations about the rise of China, about India, about where Brazil fits in, whether Europe's in decline, the transatlantic relationship. And what I found is that Japan is often an afterthought. It's a codicil in many of these conversations. It doesn't, quite often, there aren't Japanese representatives at these events presenting Japan's case, its interests and its views. And quite often, Japan is forgotten by the participants of other nations. Now, again, as an outsider, it seems to me to be an invisibility both of choice and of circumstance. Circumstance, of course, started with the Cold War and the unique nature of Japan's security relationship with the US. I mean, if one's honest, for much of the period since 1945, it suited Japan, and it suited Japan's allies, for Japan to be a passive member of the West, prospering economically, but sheltering geopolitically under the wings of the US. And of course, its constitution has kept it out of the many conflicts around the world. The proposition I'd now like to offer you is that this role in the world is no longer an option for Japan. Japan is going to have to start making choices that it's avoided during the last 50 years. the reasons, it seems to me, are fairly obvious. The rise of China and of Asia more generally confronts Japan with choices about the extent to which it's going to be a member of the West and the extent to which it's going to be a player, a part of Asia. Japan, I think, can no longer define itself as simply a passive ally of the United States. It will need, one way or another, to rediscover itself as an Asian power. And that, by necessity, means that it will have to recalibrate its relationship with the United States. And I choose that word recalibrate carefully, because when I say recalibrate, I don't mean break, don't mean damage, but I mean change its relationship with the US. And of course, Japan, I think, will have to deal with some of the shadows that history still casts over its relationship with some of its neighbors. Now, again, and I speak with humility as an outsider, it seems to me that the new government, in some of its utterances, has grasped this. I mean, some people I've spoken to in Tokyo this week have said that the Prime Minister hasn't been diplomatic enough, he's been careless sometimes in his use of language and the way he's talked about a more equal relationship with the US. But it does seem to me that a Prime Minister who says, look, the relationship with the US has to be more equal, and at the same time, we need to start building institutions, multilateral institutions in our own part of the world that don't necessarily always include the US, as with the East Asian community, is a politician who has at least grasped the challenge that faces Japan. That the need for Japan both to remain, I think, for the security of itself and of Asia, a good ally of the US, but to be active in building Asian multilateralism, and not to feel that it needs to ask Washington's permission for every move in that direction. And again, in parenthesis, as someone from Britain, I have some experience with this. Britain has had what we like to call a special relationship with the United States. It's been a relationship over 50 years, which in my view has been very much in our national interest. Although we're sometimes derided as poodles of the United States, I think broadly speaking, we have gained more in terms of America's security guarantees that it's cost us in sometimes having to follow in America's path. But we have made one critical mistake in Britain. We have allowed the relationship with the United States to stunt our relationship with our neighbors. We have been hesitant Europeans for fear of upsetting the relationship with the US. I think it would be a big mistake for Japan to be hesitant Asians for fear of upsetting the relationship with the United States.